We've reached chapter 9, and I am not going to lie to you. Chapter 9 is probably the most challenging for students. We are to the point where we're going to be creating financial statements. It's step 7 of our accounting cycle. I had to think there a minute. These are the reports that are going to be public, especially for corporations, but managers, everybody's going to be looking at these things and making decisions, so we need to make sure that they're right. It's going to be a step away from what we've been doing so far. You're going to have to kind of change some of your thinking a little bit, so I hope you'll pay close attention, you'll follow along, you'll do the activities, and then be willing to come back and watch the videos if you're struggling with some of them. The financial statements, there's 3 of them. There's an income statement, a statement of changes in owner's equity, and a balance sheet. And we need to complete them in this order for this reason. When we produce the income statement, it will tell us what our net income or our net loss is. We're then going to take that net income or net loss, and we're going to use it when we prepare the statement of changes in owner's equity. The statement of changes in owner's equity is going to produce our ending capital, and we need that ending capital in order to create our balance sheet. And our balance sheet is similar to a trial balance, but not exactly. We just want to make sure that our accounting equation is in balance before we end our accounting cycle. We're going to start with the income statement. It's probably the easiest. This is by far the hardest. And balance sheet, there's one little tricky part. Because you may want to come back to look at one or all 3 of them, I'm going to divide it up into 3 videos. This one's going to be a short video covering income statement. This one will probably be a little longer. It's way more challenging. And then we'll end with balance sheet. Let's begin with the income statement. You might want to turn to pages 224 and 225 in your textbook to kind of follow along. I'm going to show you a few things up here in the overhead, and then we're going to switch to actually doing problem 9.4 in your textbook. Notice that on an income statement, we have a heading very similar to the one that we used in the worksheet. It has the who, what, and when. Who is the company? What is what we're preparing? That changes just slightly. It's now an income statement. And then the date is going to be similar to the one that we used on the worksheet. It's going to indicate what the period was, for the month ended, for the year ended, for the period ended, for the quarter ended, and then the last day of that accounting period. Excuse me. Here is, it's a rough visual, so you really want to make sure that you're looking in the textbook. The income statement is basically a reflection of our income statement columns here. You'll notice that we have 3 headings that are going to be lined up along the side here: revenue, expenses, and net income, which are what we had here. We have our revenue, we have our expenses, and then our net income. We're going to list them individually under the headings. In this case, we only had 1 revenue. So we're going to list it there. That's going to be significant later. Here we have 3 expenses, so we have to have the word total expenses. If I had multiple revenues, I'd have to add the line total revenue. Over here is probably the one tricky part. Now this doesn't look that different than what we have up here. We have our credits and our debits, but really in financial statements, these are not considered credits and these are not considered debits. Rather, these are totals, and these are the individual amounts that create the totals. It doesn't look like that now, but it will. So here, in the case of having only 1 revenue, since I don't have to add it to anything else, that is my total. Whatever my balance was in revenue, that's my total, and I'm going to bring it straight across. With expenses, I had 4 of them, so I listed them here. I listed the individual amounts, and I put a single rule to say I'm going to add those together. And then I brought the total expenses all the way across to the total column. Then I have my revenue and my expenses. I'm going to draw a single rule, and I'm going to find the difference. If it's a loss, I might actually have a bigger number down here, but I'm just going to find the difference between the 2, and I'm going to write it down here. And I'm going to label it as either net income or net loss. In this case, it was an income. If this amount is the same as your net income on your worksheet, then you can put a double rule and say you're done. Pretty simple. Here I believe is an oh, here it is in bigger format, sorry about that. Oh, nope, it's a net loss. So in this case, we had one revenue. So we brought the total all the way over. Here we had 5 expenses. We listed them first, put a single rule, and then brought our total expenses all the way over to the right-hand column. We found the difference between the two and wrote a single rule. Notice I don't have a minus sign here. Rather, I just wrote net loss over here and then put my double rule. And I wish I had an example of one with double revenue, but hopefully we'll do one of those in our review here. Welcome back. We're ready to try an income statement. You'll notice on page 165 of the workbook, you have a completed worksheet. We're going to be preparing the financial statements for Wilderness Rentals for the month ended September 30th, and we're going to be using these values to create our income statement, well, actually all of our financial statements. If you go to page 166, at the top of the page you'll see a 2-column form, and actually all of our financial statements are going to be a 2-column form. Up here is going to determine what it is. We're going to use the information from the top of our worksheet to fill in the 3-line heading on our income statement. It's Wilderness Rentals. The what is no longer a worksheet, it's rather an income statement. And the date is going to be the same for the month ended September 30th of the current year. All right, for our income statement, we're going to be using the values for our revenue and all of our expenses. We're going to start with our heading revenue. Remember, it starts at the left edge of the paper. And you're going to simply list the number of revenues that we have. I only have one, equipment rental revenue. And you would find the balance for the equipment rental revenue is $10,629, and write it over here in the left, or excuse me, the right column. Not because it's a credit, but because it's the total. Your next line is going to be your expenses. You could write it on the very next line, or you can skip a line. Either way, I'm going to skip it just so you can see it clearly. And you're going to be listing the 4 expenses: advertising, maintenance, rent, and utilities. And then listing their balances on the left column, not because they're debits, but because we need to add them together to get a total. So I'll give you just a minute or two to fill those in. If I go too fast, stop the video until you get caught up. Notice that we've indented it just slightly. Once you've listed your 4 expenses, You're going to draw a single rule because you're ready to add them up. And we're going to add the total, or we're going to add the label total expenses underneath our last expense. Get your calculators out, add those four together. You should have gotten 8,817. Since it's a total, we bring it all the way over to the right-hand column. Our last entry is going to be our net income or our net loss. If this is how much revenue we made and this is how much expenses, did we make money or lose money? We made money, so it's a net income. So you would draw a single rule under the total expenses. You would find the difference between those two, which happens to be 1,812. You'd have to use your calculator. And we would label it over here, all the way to the left-hand side, net income. After you have calculated this, you then want to go back to your worksheet to see if, in fact, our net income was 1,812. Yep, you did it right. So then we can double rule it. Just so you can see it a little better, I'm going to make our rulings just a little darker here, so you know where they belong. Fairly simple, and I think you'll be okay with this one without a lot of extra practice.